Hello, I'm Debbie Bell-Hosking here at EBAday in Vienna, and I'm joined by Thierry Chilosi of SWIFT. Now, of course, when we mention SWIFT, we're talking about cross-border payments. It's a very wide and interesting landscape. So first of all, Thierry, hello.
Hello.
So you heard my introduction there, and we mentioned it earlier, and you were nodding when I said it's a wide landscape, cross-border payments. So first of all, let's get your take on the European payments landscape at the moment and SWIFT's role within it.
It's a buzzing moment right now in the European payment landscape, but I'll start globally in general. There's a lot happening on cross-border payments. If we take it in Europe, there's a couple of things happening. The first one is a modernization of the infrastructure. What does it mean? We are renewing all the rails in Europe. And at the same time, we are renewing at SWIFT's side the rails for cross-border. And that is driven by a number of factors. And if I were to cite a few, first one is growing digitalization. I mean, everybody wants everything immediately, in an instant. That's the world we live in. Tighter competition. We see new ways of doing things. And that, if you will, spur innovation. The other point that is quite important to say is the regulators are paying quite some attention in cross-border payments. They are, of course, renewing the infrastructure, but also there is an expectation that we make things better, faster, and cheaper. So, if you will, in Europe, it's the perfect storm. We can look at it with the glass half empty, which is to say we have so much to do, it's so fragmented. On top of it, we have a very sensitive geopolitical context. But we can look at it also with the glass half full. And in there, I would like to say that in Europe, we have the ingredients to become, if you will, the Silicon Valley of payments. All the ingredients are there. The infrastructure is renewing. We're talking about a lot of new innovation, whether it comes from open banking, whether it's about CBDCs, interlinking MIs. So at SWIFT, we're quite excited about that opportunity.
So that's a nice way to close your answer to that question. You're saying for you the glass is half full, the ingredients are there, and actually this is an exciting landscape. So let's look towards the future. Yeah. How do you envisage the future of cross-border payments?
So our vision of the future of cross-border payments is a bit powered by our strategy, which is to make things instant and frictionless. So the question is, how are we going to make that happen? So we start with where do we want to be in a couple of years from now? We want to be in a world where consumers, whether they're individuals or corporates, they're going to have the options to make payments in any way they choose. And that's what the banks are readying. This is what institutions like EBAday clearing are readying. We are here in this conference, and we were in a panel earlier on. We were talking about how we're readying the new rails of the future. But SWIFT and the European community, we are powered by that same vision of instant and frictionless. We're well on the way here. So we're not talking about something we're starting now. We started that journey a while back ago. So we have instant payment schemes in Europe, and we're busy. We announced here at EBAday, for example, the partnership between EBA and TCH on linking cross-borders, if you will, the MI, the instant payment MI in one country to another one. That's about making payments instant and frictionless. So there's a number of things that are already underway. SWIFT is also being mentioned quite a number of times. We're quite excited about that with the SWIFT Go initiative, which is about making cross-border payments low value at a cheaper cost and completely predictable. If you think about it, the SWIFT ecosystem links about 4 billion accounts. And if we get all the banks together in that promise, that's going to change the life of the consumers and of the corporate customers. So another example of what's underway is the concept of pre-validation. If we want to make payments instant, we need to remove all the friction. And SWIFT is working on a pre-validation service cross-border. The European community is looking at rolling out what we call confirmation of payee, which is also checking that the money is arriving to the right account. And those two things, they plug into each other. So I think we're in the moment that if we partner right, the investment that we're making to make domestic payment, euro payment better, are going to be the same reuse for making cross-border payments better. So that vision of instant frictionless is something that we share together, and we believe that the success will come in that cooperation between European level, domestic level, and cross-border level.
So that's interesting. You're talking about partnering, you're talking about less friction, and earlier on in your answer, you also said that the future was that people will be able to pay in any way they like.
Yes.
So that brings us to CBDCs. what's your take on that, and where does SWIFT stand?
Yes, CBDC is an exciting topic. We just came off of a panel that was discussing that. And our take at it is essentially, we want to make sure the back-end rails that the banks will use will be agnostic of any settlement type, any currency. So CBDC is you could see as another currency, if you will. It's a digital currency. It's one that the central banks are busy building, thinking about how they're going to roll it out. And they're starting with, if you will, the domestic side of things, right? Because the central bank is looking at its own ecosystem. The euro is talking about the digital euro. How do we make the digital euro ubiquitous? How does it solve problems that currently we have? At SWIFT, we're experimenting. We're trying to be a step forward. We say, okay, for CBDCs to be successful, perhaps they will not stay within the Eurozone. Maybe they need to travel abroad. So instead of finding ourselves in a situation where we need to think later, how do we make that happen? We have started experiment. We started 2 years ago. The first question was, what roles should SWIFT play? And there we rapidly concluded that we would play the role of an interoperator. So how do we make sure CBDC in one country can interact with that of another country? And we did a first series of proof of concept. And I'm excited to announce that just 2 weeks ago, we announced the second level of that experiment. We want to try to replicate in a real environment. How does a transaction start in one CBDC ecosystem, goes cross-border, so we manage all the currency exchange, all the different processes that have to be applied, and then money arrives in a second ecosystem that is also a CBDC ecosystem. And this is following an experiment that we did a year ago, which was to interlink a CBDC with, for example, another payment ecosystem, which is an RTGS or an instant payment system. And what we started to find, I don't want to steer yet because we have to publish the results yet, but that interoperability is actually quite a complex task. And we reverse the problem. We say, if CBDCs are to be successful in the cross-border space, what needs to be there? And that's the problem statement that we put on ourselves, the challenge we put ourselves together with the banks. And like I said, I don't want to jump to conclusion, but the first finding seems to point that the same rails that we would be building to support the evolution of our instant and frictionless payments, we could reuse that same technology, that same data standard to also vehiculate CBDCs cross-border. So we think that's a good start, and let's see if we can, when CBDCs will be ready for prime time, we make sure they can travel abroad.
Thierry, thank you. That's so interesting, and we got a little sneak peek as well into your research. So thank you very much.
Thanks.